everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today we are continuing the Nemesis Lockdown solo playthrough. This game coming from Awaken Realms. We're back on Mars, and you'll notice something that wasn't there at the tail end of the last video, and that moves us into the big major correction that I want to make from part number 2 at the very end of the video. The Queen is still very much alive. And that's all thanks to the sharp eye of Jacob from part number 2, who mentioned in the comments that when you're going up against a queen or a breeder, and believe me, I knew this, it just slipped the mind in the moment, you're supposed to instead pull 2 Night Stalker attack cards and then combine the upper left-hand numbers in value together to get your total health. So I'll walk you through the 2 attacks that I made at the very end of part number 2, and I'll show you how things have changed because the queen, as of right now, isn't dead. So the first attack I made put 2 damage, or 2 red cubes. You're seeing 5 on screen right now. Just ignore that for a moment. The first attack was 2 damage against the queen. So I would go ahead and pull the first card, which I did in the prior video, which ended up being a 3. At the time I said, well, I didn't kill the queen, but really I should have pulled the next card in line behind it, which you also saw in the other video, which is a 4. So the total would have been 7 health up against 2 damage that I put against the queen. Not enough. Then I went ahead and did a stronger attack where I was able to put 3 additional damage on the queen, which you can see right here. I'd now go back to the Night Stalker attack deck, flip over 2 cards, add them together, and see whether or not we've killed them. This is where it gets fun. I haven't done that yet. I don't know. We might have enough right here. We might not. It's really up to the cards. And the cards have let us know that that is a hard no. The queen is very much alive. So in terms of gameplay impact, that would have been major going forward. We were able to catch that, and thankfully it happened at the very end of the video, so I'm basically walking back to the previous player phase to make that adjustment to have the queen still be here. The one other major change is I no longer have the queen's carcass in my right hand anymore, so this is going away. But as of right now, not much else has changed. The queen is still in the room with me. My card hand was completely burnt at the end of part number 2. We have a brand new drawn up handful of cards with 1 contamination card in the mix as well. I'll show you the cards I have in hand right now, and we'll begin the next player phase. Again, as you saw at the end of part number 2, I have maintenance plan, it should work, emergency key, a contamination card, and demolition. So again, a huge thanks to Jacob for mentioning that. Even just the way he wrote the comment made it seem like he didn't want to be that guy to mention it, but to be completely honest, I love hearing feedback around gameplay and rules, and it really does help to change up and make sure that we don't have any negative ripple effects going through the rest of the playthrough. Now, sometimes you can't really change things. You might be too far gone at a certain point, but we were at the perfect spot to make that correction. Now, the only downside for me is by making that correction, I have a problem in the same room as me. Just before we go ahead with my actions for this player phase, let's talk about the current state of my Janitor. He's got 2 serious wounds. They're both dressed and they're flipped face down to denote that. You can see it on the right hand side of the screen. He's also got a light wound, and he's slowly progressing up the track here. Not because I want it to happen, I really don't, but if he gets up to that serious wound card, he'll have 3, and then 1 more light wound beyond that ends our game. We're done. So we are that close to death. So it's not looking good, but we also know there are cards inside the rooms that we can find by searching that can potentially heal and completely remove a serious wound as well. You can dress them and you can also remove them completely. So finding ones that get rid of them completely would be huge. The other thing to mention is the nail gun is currently completely out of ammo. So in terms of shooting a gun, whether it's a classic weapon or an energy weapon, and this is a classic weapon, I can't do that right now. I don't have a tool belt to reload this thing, so that option's off the table. I do have the ability to melee attack the queen, but as you will see when you check out the rule book, that is a very dangerous roll. First off, the only 2 sides where you'll be successful in even doing damage to the queen is if you land this side right here, or if you land this side right here. Any other result, no matter what it is going to be a serious wound coming to you. So literally, if I take a serious wound, I die, because that would be 3 serious wounds, and I already have a light wound, I'm dead. I can't risk that, so I'm not doing it. It's worth mentioning that the known weakness that I do have available, the first one that I can make use of based on where my knowledge token is landing on the threshold, I can only make use of that additional injury if I'm using a classic weapon, which mine is completely depleted of ammo, or I'm using a melee weapon, which I don't have. Now what I do have is I have a taser, and this taser allows me to choose an intruder in the room you're in. It suffers an injury and it retreats, so we could taser the queen. And by tasering it, we might get lucky because nearby in a CSS control room there is some fire. So potentially hitting it with some damage, check to see if we've killed it. If we don't, it might end up retreating into a room with fire, and if it does, that could be a benefit for us as well. Plus the fact it's no longer in our room, which is just a huge benefit in and of itself. I'm going to go ahead and use my taser. It's a one-time use item. It costs 1 extra card from hand in order to do this, so demolition will be discarded. Choosing the queen as the intruder, it's going to suffer an injury. We're going to check now to see whether we've killed it with 6 damage. Well, that's truly disappointing. We have a 7 and we only have 6 damage on the queen, so she is still holding on. Check it out, even though the taser wasn't able to put enough damage onto the queen to kill it, when we go to pull an event card for its retreat, we take a look at the top right hand corner to determine which corridor it's moving down, and it is worth mentioning, if it happens to be in a room with a technical corridor and it goes into a technical corridor, it literally loses all of its wounds, and the token for the queen goes back into the intruder development bag, which means it can come back out at full strength later on. Thank goodness she has no technical corridors around her, and even better, this came out as a 3, so the queen is moving to that CSS control room that's on fire. And just like that, the queen has retreated into the CSS control room, still has 6 damage, in a room with fire. We'll see how that pans out in the future. Let's continue our turn. Our first action is done. For the second action of my turn, I'm going to head to the northeast using the emergency key to pay for a regular move. We're going to discover what's in that other room. The janitor finds his way into the archive, and this room will have a malfunctioning marker on it, so the archive cannot be used at the moment, unless of course I have some kind of game card, which I actually do, that would allow me to use it anyway, and that's perfect. And then it says it's going to be on 3 for how many searches, but again, when playing solo, half and then round it up, so 2. Now we're going to go ahead and do our noise roll for checking out the archive. What do we get? A 2. That actually worked out not bad, as I don't really have plans to go that way just yet, but at the same time probably will at some point, seeing as there's a lot more rooms to discover on the second level. I haven't even gone there yet. And now thinking about it, it actually might not be a great place for that token to be, because we have fully explored the entire bottom level, and beyond the laboratory and potentially killing the queen, taking its carcass to the laboratory to bump up our knowledge, we're really still trying to find a place to send the signal. And as you guys remember, that is tied. I need to get the signal sent and a knowledge 8 to succeed at that option of the objective card, or just get a larva on my character board, which hasn't happened yet, but could still happen as we continue to go for the bottom objective on the card, which I think is the one to gun for. And the other one, if it happens, well, it happens, and then at that point we can try to get out as fast as possible. Now, you guys might not know the importance of the archives, but it really is awesome for trying to bump myself up to a knowledge 8. And that's because as long as I can use a card to get around the malfunction marker that is there that stops me from using the archives in the first place, which I do have, and I'll show you that in a moment, we can examine the archive, and that allows us to perform an action only if our knowledge token is inactive, which it is right now. As you'll see on the actual status bar of the laboratory, the beaker on the yellow token is empty right now, so it's inactive. When we choose to use the archive, the room action, we gain 2 knowledge, so we go up the track by 2. We get to flip our knowledge token to the active side, and then we get to peek at any contingency token even outside of our section. I'm going to go ahead and use It Should Work, which says I can use a room action even if there's a malfunction marker. It costs an additional card, so I'm discarding both, and that's going to leave just a contamination card in hand. Now this is why it's awesome, because going up by 2 allows me to gain the availability to use the known weakness we have here. We finally have enough knowledge to make use of it. So now going forward, we always resolve the lower value of surprise attacks. So when we do get attacked and we're flipping over a token to see whether light or dark, and there's usually 2 different values, and obviously the one in the dark is usually worse, in those cases we'll always act as if the lights are on, because we're not afraid of the dark. It's important to mention that even though it tells you can peek at any contingency token in any section, it is not including the active contingency token that's way up in the top right hand corner of the game board. You are not allowed to check that one at all. So we're going to go ahead and grab, we'll just take the top one off here, and we have kill all who did not send the signal. That contingency token I peeked at also goes into my inventory with the 2 other ones I started the game with, thereby giving me more and more information on what the leftover possible active contingency that the company has established and put into place actually is. We're kind of working our way backwards to deduce what that active contingency could be. All right, heading into our event phase here, and just so you're aware, I only have 1 card in hand, the contingency card. I'm choosing at this point at the end of my player phase to discard it. So that is one thing you can do at the end of your player phase. If you have contamination cards in hand and you don't want it to clog up your hand for the next upcoming round, you can discard it. But remember, if you keep the contamination card in your hand, and I get the rest card, then I'm able to try and scan it, right? So it's a kind of situation of like, do you want to clear up your hand? Do you want to try to scan it to see if you're contaminated in advance? Those are the kind of things you have to think about. For me right now, having only 1 card to drop in my action deck, it's pretty sure off of memory that it's not the rest card in there, but regardless, we're gonna have to reshuffle the entire deck anyway, so I'm just ditching it and hoping that it doesn't come back when I least want it. Now, in this case here, the time track for the event phase, we're currently not in a spot with a CSS token, so nothing to flip, but we do move it forward 1, and there's no power change, but you'll see the next move that'll go from 6 to 5 in the future will actually downgrade the power in the only area of the facility that has some right now, which is the lower level I'm in. So that is something we're going to want to keep our eyes on as we move forward into the next player phase, if we can even do anything about it based on what we have available. There is only 1 noise token in play right now, and it's beside my character, so it's not going to be removed at the moment when power's on. It stays where it is. Right now, the intruders are going to attack, so every intruder in the same room as a character performs an attack. Thank goodness I'm not in the same room, hence the reason I use the taser to get it away from me and not have to deal with trying to run away from it and take an attack as I run away. So that taser really came in handy. Now the best part ever, the intruder fire damage step. This finally does happen where we get to place a damage marker on the queen, bring her up to 7, and now we check 2 cards to see whether we've killed her. This is absolutely unreal. Pulling 2 cards, I got a 5 and an arrow. This is the first time we pulled an arrow during an intruder check for damage. When this happens, it means that that intruder is going to attempt to retreat. And we're going to pull an event card, which I placed right here. I have no idea what it's going to do. It could end up in a technical corridor if it happens to go down the 2 path, which would mean all of the damage that I put on it is going to just disappear and it's going back into the intruder bag. Or even worse, it could start progressing back towards me or further away and making it tougher for me to kill it in order to use it in the laboratory as a corpse in order to get my knowledge up even further. What is going to happen? Let's find out. It's going to 1. That was the best possible spot it could have gone to besides just outright dying, which would have been fantastic, but instead it's run into the other room with fire. This queen, not the smartest this time around. And honestly, now looking at it, it's actually to my advantage that she gets closer and closer to the laboratory. Plus, she's going to take an extra damage the next time around, which might kill her. And if it does, she's that much closer to where I need to go in order to research her corpse, which would be fantastic. However, saying all that, we're not out of the woods yet. We have to pull the event card, and it says Scent of Blood. Now, with this particular card, now there actually is an intruder on the game board in this situation. We're going to go ahead and take a look to see where this individual moves. So you'll see that if the symbol is not showing in the top section of the card, then it's not going to perform the move that it's talking about at the very top. So the queen will stay where she is. Let's read on. It says, Scent of Blood. Place a noise marker in each corridor without a noise marker connected to a room with a character who has any undressed serious wounds. Thank goodness both of my serious wounds are dressed. That's not going to affect us, and we're still in a lit up section, lit up room of this facility, so the bottom portion also doesn't affect us. We get away scot-free here. For the intruder bag development poll, we got ourselves a larva, and as we've seen before, we're going to take this token and discard it, replacing it with an adult token that will go into the intruder development bag as these creatures grow stronger over time. Drawing up for the next turn, we have maintenance plan, we have cleanup, search, another search, and interruption. Without even batting an eye, the first thing I'm doing is searching. This room I'm in has 2 things I can potentially find. I'd love to get rid of a serious wound if I can find a med kit or even find potential new guns or something, ammo, anything. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and search. I'm pulling 2 cards. I'm going to go from the green deck this time. All right, in terms of options here, I have Close, which allows me to discard a slime marker or dress one serious wound. The slime marker is still on my character board and is quite annoying depending on noise rolls, so that actually might not be a bad option. And then the Regen is a fully load of ammo in a flamethrower, which I haven't gotten yet, but I know how to get it. But the downside with that is I'd be spreading fire at a more rapid pace, and, you know, fire could get it a little bit out of control, but might be useful. Down at the bottom there, it says Knowledge 5, which I actually do have now. It says choose one intruder in the room you're in. It retreats. Oh, that's also a really good one too. I decided to go ahead with the clothing, so I placed that in my inventory area. There's something I want to touch on that I did earlier when I went ahead and activated my knowledge token. You're probably wondering, like, what does that do? What is the point of that? Basically, there are some in-game objectives or gameplay elements that might call for whether or not that knowledge token is active or not, so that's one thing. The other reason is that it denotes that you've already gone ahead and used the archive room and you can't use it again. Because in order to use the archive room, you have to have one of the knowledge tokens that isn't active. So at this point, I couldn't just sit there milking it, trying to bump my knowledge all the way up to 8 to easily get to the objective 8 I'm trying to accomplish. Let's go ahead and do another search in this location. We're going to deplete it down to 0. There's no more searches left. I'm going to go for green again, still hoping to find something to deal with one of my serious wounds permanently. Now this is really interesting. I got one card I'd seen before and I didn't choose it, so it's back again. Could help me to get intruders out of my space. But the research documents one is really interesting because it says to gain 1 knowledge for each discovered weakness. I have 2 discovered weaknesses, so if I went ahead and used the research documents, I could bump my knowledge up from a 5 to a 7, which isn't getting it to the 8 that it needs to be to meet the objective that I have. What would actually do that better would be if I can get the Queen's carcass to the laboratory, which is probably what's going to get me to the 8. So what I probably should do in this situation is skip the research documents, seeing that we know that the Queen will get another damage on it, and fingers crossed that will be enough to kill it. And if it's not, then I've got my work cut out for me still. But for now, I'm going to risk it and take the item on the right. Well, this is a tad embarrassing, something that I just noticed in my inventory row, but it was hiding down in the bottom portion because it was tucked into the actual card tray. But it says here for Knowledge 3, discard this card during your melee attack action instead of getting a contamination card and rolling a combat die. Then instead, you're going to target this individual and it's going to suffer an injury. So it's just a clean injury straight through, which would have been nice to throw onto the Queen just to give an additional one to push us forward a little further. But I do have this in my back pocket if she gets a bit too close. Now I'm going to make a move into the isolation room, a regular move, just discarding 1 cleanup card. Let's go ahead and make our noise roll, see how we do. A 3. That's not too bad, and with the last 2 cards that I have, I'm going to carefully move into the laboratory. And just like that, I'm in the laboratory waiting for the last fire damage to hopefully kill the Queen so I can run in there, get her corpse, and go back to the laboratory. Going into the next event phase, the CSS token that is attached to the time token is going to flip over. We'll see what pod is launching. In this case, CSS pod A would have launched, and we move the time token to the next space. As there's literally only one area of the facility with power, something's got to power down, and it's going to be where I currently am. Next up is the noise removal step. We've been able to take advantage of this the entire game because I've always had power on in the areas I've been in. Now this section is powered down. There's no lights on, which means we no longer get to remove noise from the area. Thankfully for the intruder attack, it's not going to hurt me. It's in a separate room, and now the fire is going to do 1 damage to the Queen, and I'm going to hope that at 8 damage, it's enough to kill it. And that, my friends, is going to do it. The Queen, with only 7 health and 8 damage, finally succumbs to her wounds. That was pretty awesome. The corpse token has now been placed in the Deacon room, and we have what we need to get in there, get it on the next turn, get out, back to the laboratory, and get our knowledge up to 8. The event is next. We have no movement because there's no intruders in play currently. Fire in the whole stage. Place a fire marker in cargo sending system rooms A, B, and C. Each character there with no action cards on hand suffers a serious wound. Thankfully, I'm in the laboratory, so I'm okay. But guess what? Cargo sending system B and the one over here, A, both are going to erupt into flames. Well, that's pretty unfortunate. Those 2 areas are now on fire, and our fire markers are starting to be used a little bit more often. Now, we only have 4 in play right now for fire. In terms of malfunction tokens, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 malfunction tokens in total. The breeder token was pulled for the intruder development bag, and when you get one of those, you're going to return this token to the bag. I'm going to perform a noise roll, and if the player's character is in combat with an intruder, they do not perform a noise roll. But in this case, we definitely are going to be doing that noise roll. Yes, indeed. Let's see how this noise roll goes. Hopefully, it's not going to be a 1. Oh no, it's a silence and I'm slimed. Well, that just made things a little bit tougher, and I thought it was smart when I went ahead and did a regular move out of the archive into the isolation room and then did a careful move instead of using my clothes at the time. So what I probably should have done in hindsight, and hindsight's always 50-50, I don't like that term, but basically I should have gone ahead and done a regular move, and then a regular move, and maybe when I was in there, then used the clothes to get rid of the slime. I didn't envision another noise roll, forgot about that intruder bag development being pretty nasty, so now I have noise surrounding everywhere around the laboratory, making this move to the Deacon room and back to the laboratory that much tougher. Going into the next player phase, I have jury rigging, I have emergency key, I have it should work, a contamination card, and rest. Now, even though we've got noise all around the laboratory, I still have that card in my inventory called the Analyze Toolset card, which I can use elsewhere in order to analyze a heavy object that I can actually use to gain knowledge. So I can do this even in the Deacon room. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to carefully move out of the laboratory into the Deacon room. I've carefully moved with the janitor, discarding these 2 cards right here. He's now in the Deacon room, and I get to place where the noise marker goes in that target room. So I'm going to place it over here. Now that we're in there, I'm going to choose to pick up that heavy object of the corpse. Now, what's kind of wild about my situation right now is I'm already 1 action in. If I take another action, I'm going to take a light wound. So regardless, based on the fact that I've got all kinds of rooms with fire around me, even if I make another action as a move to try and get away from the fire, I'm still taking at least 1 light wound, even if I sit still. The only way to avoid the light wound is to go back to the laboratory. That's going to likely push me right into a confrontation with one of the intruders, which I don't want to have happen right now. So what I'm going to do is I only have 2 cards in hand right now because I'm not really counting the contamination when it's clogging up my hand. So if I really want to be smart here, I'm going to probably get moving into the cargo sending system B and then into section 3 over here with 2 regular moves to just run as fast as possible away from this area of the facility that's going down fast. Because if I happen to stay in the Deacon room, let's say I analyzed the heavy object that I have to gain 8 knowledge, I'd only have 1 card left, which means not only would I be taking a light wound at the end of that second action, then at the end of my turn, the furthest I could get to is here or the other flaming red room. So I'd be taking 2 light wounds, which would push me into a serious wound. I'm not letting that happen. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get moving. Let's go ahead and use an emergency key here. Actually, this is really painful because I needed this to use the elevator when it's powered down. So this is actually really bad timing, but I think I'm near the end of my deck. I think there's 2 cards left, so I need to reshuffle anyway. Maybe I'll get lucky and get it back. So we're going to discard that one. We're going to have the janitor hightail it out of that room into the cargo sending system B room. All right, let's go ahead and roll for noise, see what happens in terms of where it lands. It lands on a 4. So we have a noise marker here at 4, which is right behind me, so that's good news, the only good news. I'm also going to take a light wound because I took my second action and I'm in a room with fire. I'm still slimed, which is not good. And then I'm going to use my final card here to get out of this flaming room to ensure I don't take another fire hit at the end of my turn. We're going to do a regular move into section 3. Let's see how the noise roll goes for me. We got ourselves a 3. Just so you're aware, I discarded this card in order to make that move. That means I have only a contamination card in hand, which means I'm not doing much of anything this turn. And because I had to use my rest card during my turn, I'm not going to be able to get rid of this contamination one by scanning it and hoping that it's not infected. So for now, I think I'll discard it and really end my turn off with not taking a fire damage because I ran out of there as fast as I could. I'll be able to in the future use my Analyze tool set to bump my knowledge up to 8, but at least I'm safe because that area got way too dangerous, way too quick. Looking for a CSS token underneath the time token. There isn't one. We're just moving the time marker over by 1 to the 4 position. Just like that, time track is all squared away. Let's do some noise removal, but actually that's not happening because everything is in complete darkness right now. Intruders are not going to attack and there's no intruder fire damage, so we're going right to the event card. It seems like everything has to do with fire right now. It says that's hot. Place a fire marker in the backup power supply and power generator room. Everything is bursting into flames at this point. Remove this event from the game and reshuffle the events deck, including the discard pile. Thank goodness that I got out of there when I did. I accomplished everything I wanted to do, and that area looks like an absolute mess now. And just when I thought I was safe, the intruder development bag step begins, and we pulled an adult token. All right, just to give you a breakdown of what's going on around me, I have noise in corridors 3 and 4, nothing in 2 and 1. Let's see how this noise roll goes. 4, that is bad. Corridor 4 is this one right here, so another noise marker here is going to have this one removed, and we are having an adult show up as I pulled an adult from the intruder bag. What's really sad about this is we avoided all the insanity, and then the very, very last step, just before I had a chance to potentially get out of here, there comes an intruder. And then on top of it, based on the weakness that I have knowledge to use, even though I'm in a dark sector, I get to use the lowest value here for a surprise attack. But the ironic thing about it is that I don't have any cards in my hand, so the surprise attack is happening. Pulling a Night Stalker attack card for the surprise attack, we definitely have an adult icon here. It's a cut. It says the character suffers 1 light wound and gets a contamination card. No! What makes this even worse is at the very bottom, for the first time in the game, the next additional pain coming my way triggers because we are in a sector that is dark. It says the character suffers 1 additional light wound. My friends, that is going to be it, because the 1 light wound will push us to a serious wound, and then another light wound kills us. Right as I tried to desperately get to the elevator or the stairwell corridor to get away from the fire, the malfunctions, the queen, everything that was going on down in that area, this last intruder makes a couple swipe cuts at me and takes me down at the legs. The serious wound that I get for the first light wound is going to be a leg one. It says the cost of your escape movement action is a 2 going forward, and then immediately, because I'm in that dark section and that section happened to just power down, I get a light wound, and my friends, that is going to end it. The janitor's days in the facility are done. And this is what I mean by an absolutely thematic experience that Nemesis throws at you, making you feel as though you're winning in certain moments, then losing, then winning again, then losing. And then right when you feel like you can see the sun coming over the horizon, you think you've got to knowledge 8, and all you need to do now is just send the signal and everything's going to be fine. Right when you think you've strategized everything out perfectly, an intruder comes out of nowhere and hits you really, really badly at the worst possible time frame, especially when the lights just happen to have gone out, making their typical attack that much more severe, resulting in, unfortunately, the player taking on too many wounds and dying. And that, my friends, is how you play Nemesis Lockdown from Awaken Realms. It's not necessarily how you play in order to win, because that's not what happened here, but as you will see, playing this game in a solo fashion, you are definitely up against a challenge just in the way the game presents itself. You can also flip the game board over and play on the alternative side with a whole different set of rules and components that aren't even used in the regular version of Nemesis Lockdown. So there's a lot here to explore and discover, plus the ability to mix and match things between Lockdown and Nemesis and bring different types of intruders over and change things up that way. There's a lot of variability, especially if you backed almost everything that came in the Kickstarter or a good chunk of the gameplay specific items. Now, just before we end off the video, something I love to do with Nemesis is to check some of the hidden information and things that we weren't aware of, at least until we got towards the end of the game. Seeing as we already lost, we might as well take a look. I would love to know which room I'm able to send the signal from and where that would have been, and see how far away we would have had to go to get to it. So let's take a quick look at flipping over each of these tiles. This is a 2 tile, so surgery was here. Over here we had the transmitter control room, which allows us to send the signal. Over here we had the cave entrance. Over here we had the power generator, which was supposed to erupt in flames if it was active earlier. The nest was up here. Over here we have the emergency room. Over here we have the defense control room, and there is one room way up at the top, but we're not going to go ahead and dig into that one as I don't even know if I can reach it. The other thing I want to check is the active contingency, so maybe when we actually do check the active contingency, we'll take a look at that other tile just to see what was right next to the main doors on our way out. We weren't able to accomplish that, but first, let's take a look at all the contamination cards that I have, and let's scan them to see how many would have been infected. And just so you understand how many I have, with the last one I would have gained from this individual, had I had survived, I would have been going forward with 3 contamination cards in hand. So it's time to do some scanning. This one appears safe. This one also appears safe. However, the third one would have got us. Infected is right there in the middle. Now this is likely difficult to see, but the cargo sending system C is way up there near the front doors. As you remember earlier, we were supposed to place a bunch of fire on any of the A, B, or C that were revealed. So that one had not been revealed yet, so it stayed safe. The active contingency, when I flipped it over, said to kill all in the isolation room. So based on my plan, I actually was in good shape because I was certainly not planning on sitting inside of the insulation room, and that would have been the active contingency of the company, would have killed anyone in there. So if I had, gotten what I needed, let's say I sent the signal, got my 8 knowledge, and just hopped into the isolation room and hoped I won, that token would have killed me, which would have been kind of funny and also really sad. So that is truly going to do it. The board looks like an absolute disaster now that I've gone ahead and flipped everything over, but I think it's fun to kind of take a look at what could have been based on strategy and placement of different rooms and everything else. This is some of the fun within Nemesis, seeing how close you were to maybe pulling something off and how well your plan was going. Mine needed a little bit more time, and we were getting towards the end of the track, so I honestly do believe we would have gotten to the end of the track before I could have sent the signal, just based on where things were. I think I maybe was down in the trenches of the lower section of the facility just a bit too long. If I'd have gotten there a little faster, maybe thanks to the Queen showing up, that really derailed everything on me. But that's what happens in Nemesis, and you have to adjust. And I had a lot of fun playing this. I really hope that this video series helps you get the game to the table in a solo capacity and helps get you past all the rules barriers. Even the few mistakes I made in a couple of videos, I put those in the pinned comments. You can check those across the videos to ensure that you play the game correctly, or as close to being correct as possible, as we're only as human as we are, and we do make mistakes. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.